trying to make beautiful music. Hope I succeeded. So this is the first one. It's called Gaelinsky. The guard will see to your hand baggage, and the trunks will take care of themselves. Old men and maidens, young men and women, will inquire of a driver how soon his vehicle will set out. But we had no intention of backsliding, and found ourselves quite unable to guess. Wide, smooth, and hard, shaded without intermission, stretching out its length some 50 feet. How different a city they found. The merchants of the Levant thronged its bazaars. In a castle still echoing with the songs of a famous troubadour, queer windows of all sizes seemed to be keeping dark secrets. Fierce, with such an intensity and fixedness of gaze. So the poems don't look like Masostics now. What I did was I did the framed copy, colors and everything. I presented it to the person if they were alive. But in terms of possibly being published by Book Thug, having colored poetry all through the book is totally unacceptable. Wouldn't you say so?
Absolutely.
They cost too much, right?
Yeah. Okay, second one. So I wasn't really even thinking of doing 51 more poems. And I'm not going to read them all to you. The second one I thought, well, what'll I do? And I turned on Turner Classic Movies, and it was John Wayne's birthday. So they had like, you know, wall-to-wall John Wayne movies. Some of his early westerns, which are really awful. Nonetheless, you could see somewhere in there was the germ of the Duke. Some fellows lounge outside, whips under their arms, jesting with each other. Trees pose for landscape artists before quaint houses. The teamsters, hardy and handsome, make a stop here, lounging on stools inside the taverns, glasses in hand. Telling and hearing news among the old folks, laughing very often, and occasionally scolding. Or they're detained through an inquiry, and ere long we learn the secret. Each of the rivals has his own allies and scouts. Okay, so it's not really a representative portrait. So imagine Picasso's early portraits of Gertrude Stein, where she's only got one eye and it's in the middle of her forehead.
It will look like her one day.
It will. This is number 4. This is Michael Snow, artist friend of mine, also a musician. In total, the dangers and requirements were somewhat appalling. Their expedient was to make it a science and an art, like that of chivalry or social intercourse. It has been said they flourished 300 years after, something far more graceful and appropriate than Maria, the Countess of Champagne in the north. No one can separate lovers if their hearts desire to feel together. I choke up on every time. His only longing was to serve her. Nonetheless, it was through her that he gained his joy and reward. There was no lady who did not wish to yield, and the poet's wandering life most keenly felt the blow.
He was cute.
Who?
You.
Well, this Michael Snow was cute, too. He was beating him up with a stick. As we used to say back in the old days. This is number 5. It's for my sister. Couldn't be here tonight. So I told her I'd read this so she could be here in spirit. Liz Amer. Instead of being plain and hill, it's plain and valley. Maidenly birds, little, trim, demure, and shy. Who could refuse to love them? The breeze comes to us perfumed with the fragrance of the locust blossom. It appears another craftsman was challenged to a test of skill, if pressed a little, he would admit that God had made only 4 French poets. Found at the beginning of many poems that do not seem to require it, modern development did not yet exist, and the fullness of modern thought had not yet dawned. July 22nd, 2007. The reason it's called the occasional troubadour is because these are not only portraits, but they're occasional poems. So that was my sister's birthday poem. Went over to the island where she lives and presented it with this framed Masostic. She was so thrilled. And then she read it and she said, "Ah, it looks just like me." Or words that out of place. Here's number 7, Mark Bond, who you'll hear later and be able to make up your own mind whether or not this is an accurate portrait. By exclaiming, "What an extraordinary destiny," we must end as we began. An almost prophetic glimpse of the future course of science. The troubadour would always ask for something, his eyes open to the golden age of poetry. And indeed, relations were sometimes rather strained between them. And the author of that poem to his charger, which we found as he passed off the stage, which came upon the subtle doctor, but this kind of thing was no longer serious. Love, as a passion, had long seemed a childish affair, while another sense of purpose always oozes through his lines. My wife, Kate Van Dusen, couldn't be here tonight. I urge you to organize some kind of criminal group and go to Paul Dutton's house and break into his basement. And there's 2 boxes that say "but" on them. And those are Kate's books, and she doesn't have a copy. Paul wants to sell it to her for something like $45 or something.
I have one.
Oh, good. Hang on to it. This is number 10, Kate Van Dusen. For no reason at all but groundless jealousy, he kept the key himself. Recalling the central incident in that infamous Provençal romance, he resolved upon doing something for the captive heart. Love itself, by his advice, became his counselor. To tonsure his fair locks and give him the place of clerk, he was confined by her husband in a close tower, while the husband sat by, wholly unsuspicious. They had excavated a passage underground from his dwelling to the baths, while a square of the pavement was cautiously raised, and the lovers fell into each other's arms. Discovering that they'd sinned, he turned aside the sacred career he'd once begun, and that was time enough for sleepless nights. This is for Fred Gasek, who's with us tonight. And since a lot of you can't see him, I want you to try to figure out where in these few lines do I describe his baldness. And when you figure you've heard the right line, say that's it, yes, that's the one! Because I want to hear a lot of that during the Fred and I have actually done readings together for many years and have always enjoyed it. That lordly and confident air which bridges the 50 difficulties.
That's it right there.
So that's like the hair implants, right?
Bridging the difficulties.
So now interpretation comes into it, right? I mean, think about sitting down in a class somewhere, and the teacher saying, "Well, could you give me some kind of interpretation of this poem? And what is the theme of this poem?"
Baldness.
Baldness. Right, Mike?
I got it.